Welcome to Cloud Stories, where your host, Heather Smith, interviews some brilliant minds from the Xero ecosystem and beyond. This show shares stories from our community, developers, cloud integrators, end users, Xero solution providers, business consultants, accountants, bookkeepers, and people riding the cloud. Together we gain a 360-degree insight into this evolving phenomenon. We pick up tips, tools, and tactics from stories shared. We understand where the pieces of the puzzles fall into place, and in turn we can propel our business to the next level. Now here's your host, the very curious Miss Heather Smith.
Hello and welcome to Cloud Stories. I'm your host, Heather Smith, and in today's session I'm going to be speaking with Dan Fairburn from Ocius Digital. Ocius Digital is a technical yet approachable, professional yet personable, casual yet dependable business. Their clients choose Ocius Digital because of their in-depth experience and unrelenting commitment to solving the most challenging business problems. Ocius Digital understand the obstacles and opportunities that small businesses balance each day, including the seemingly never-ending demands on the directors, finding the time to work on the business and not just in the business, constantly seeking ways to minimise the administrative overheads. But before I go straight and speak to Dan, I just want to let you know, thank you very much for everyone who has been downloading the shows. If you're listening, you've been downloading the shows. I really appreciate it. We only launched recently and we've had a massive hit on iTunes downloading the shows. So thank you very much. But let's get straight on to talking to Dan from Ocius Digital. Hello, Dan.
Howdy.
Hi, how are you going?
Good. Yourself?
Good, thank you. Nice Friday night. Let's get down to the important questions, Dan. Who is your favourite superhero and why?
Oh my God. Straight off the bat. Generally I'd say, I've said to a few people Batman, but although he's a superhero, I don't believe he has a power. And I watched the Captain America films last night, so I've been enjoying them as well. But good question. Seriously good question. Right now I go Captain America, but I can't tell you why.
Okay. You look a bit like Captain America, don't you?
I wish. It's hopelessly optimistic, but thanks for the compliment.
No worries. So, Dan, can you share with us and our listeners what your business does?
Yes, certainly. So, practically speaking, we do what's termed software implementation, which is a bit of a heavy title, but effectively we help primarily small businesses that don't have or don't need an IT department or similar, but want to make a change in their business and usually are looking to bring in some kind of cloud software and usually something around Xero and its add-ons. So for those guys that don't have either a project manager or even someone with the resource internally, we work with them on a project basis to make sure everything goes in kind of as smoothly as possible.
And how do you define a small business, Dan?
It's a bit of an interesting one. I mean, the majority of our clients probably sit anywhere from sole trader, one-man band, up to generally possibly about 15 to 20 people maximum. But as a general rule, we're dealing with the director ourselves and we're dealing with the decision maker ourselves. Mm-hmm. Generally, it's companies with one or a small amount of sites or a single site. And usually it's something that's been born out of like the current director starting the business. So whether it's directly a family business or otherwise, it's usually kind of a self-centered business.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So why did you start your business, and maybe throw in when you started your business and why did you start the business?
So the business kicked off what would be nearly 18 months ago now. So we kicked off, we officially registered April the 1st, 2013.
Oh, wow. You're very new then.
Yeah. So we officially kicked off then, and the first couple of months was really exploratory. We sort of really started getting work pretty much as of last financial year start. As in Australian financial year start, July the 1st.
Which is 1st of July 2013 for our overseas listeners.
And then from there, we've pretty much run through and kind of built month on month every month. So previously, for best part of 2 years before that, in fact, just over 2 years, I used to work for a franchise company in Australia that had a trades franchise. And they moved from, it basically did the transition that a lot of our clients now do, but on a much larger scale. So they moved from an in-house system that had been built to spec over probably 5 to 10 years that just wasn't scaling to the level that was needed, and actually moved to a program called Simpro, which is one of the Xero add-ons. So that got me exposed to Xero, the product, plus the add-ons, plus the kind of people and industry associated with it. And from the franchise side, I was heavily involved in kind of project planning and set out of that transfer, which was across kind of 100 plus businesses in all kinds of different areas of Australia. And so I decided to take that, pull that out, and practically speaking, do the same thing, but with small businesses kind of one-on-one and directly with the client. So we've kicked that off about 15 to 18 months ago, kind of officially got running. And every kind of month since have pretty much grown.
So you were working as an employee, you did a massive rollout, and you realised it was work that you really liked doing, and you launched yourself as your own business.
Yeah, pretty much. So almost exactly that. So we did obviously the project that I did on an employee basis for my last employer was, practically speaking, was the same as we do with our current clients, but obviously on a much, much larger scale. But it gave me an insight into, I suppose, the nuances of what's there and what I enjoy in it, and also gave me a lot of exposure to people within the industry, both Xero employees, Xero add-ons, partners, and I kind of moved from that, and several kind of people commented on the skill set that I have. My background is my degree is business management, so neither I nor any of our guys are IT guys.
Oh, okay.
Technically, and actually, we tend to find it comes as more of a positive, because we tend to come to things from more of a business approach. The technicalities of setting things up are, without sounding flippant, they're not entirely difficult. The skill is really finding business workflows, finding why people do things, how they do things, and kind of, I suppose, working out workflows from that point of view for the client, more than actually just getting information in and starting to run.
So the term that's thrown around in this industry is cloud integrator, and Xero has its own certification program for cloud integrators. So I'll just throw that out there. But that's essentially what you're doing in the business. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's our kind of, I suppose, mentioned software implementation before. Cloud integration is, yes, you're right, primarily the skill that we bring to it, and that's specifically what Xero kind of terms it, because so when we first kicked off, there was a bit of discussion with Xero, because we had a business that didn't fall into a category.
Absolutely.
So we're not developers, we're not bookkeepers, we're not accountants.
Yes.
What do we do?
Yeah.
And that's slowly seen. So the cloud integrator channel, from Xero's point of view, was, I suppose, officially recognized late last year.
Yes.
And it has kind of grown since that, as accountants have slowly sort of realized, and I suppose bookkeepers and financial planners as well, in the same respect as you don't really want me doing your finances. Accountants and bookkeepers, I think, are realizing that there's an opportunity here to work with a specialist to give their clients better software, better options, and better insights, to then allow them to go and do their job much more efficiently.
Yes, yeah.
So that's the channel that we're termed under. And where we are now is essentially we have a fair size of the market, but of a very small market. It's still largely under-recognized. It's getting bigger pretty much every week. And I think, especially with at the time of chatting now, with XeroCon pretty much coming around the corner, I think
that's the Sydney 2014 XeroCon for people listening in. Sorry. Yes.
No. So that will kind of shine a light again on our sort of little AV industry. Certainly there's a bump up from the last sort of February 2014 roadshows that were in Australia. There was a large bump up from there, because Chris Ridd, the MD of Xero Australia, obviously mentions kind of integrators a lot on stage, and that was kind of brought in as a real channel. So I think we'll start to see that again coming into the end of the year after XeroCon.
Yes. No, it is interesting. Xero has defined these three categories, and Australia has the three categories very much defined, but many of us, myself, I'm a management accountant, so I don't neatly fall into either of the categories because I'm neither an accountant because they deem that to be really a tax accountant. So it's trying to squeeze yourself into something that people know. And I was questioning someone's business card the other day, which was all about cloud. And I was like, do actually the people that you're trying to get on board know what that means? So, yeah, we're sort of at the cutting edge trying to explain what we actually do and how we can actually help them. But with what you've just shared with me, I'm going to jump ahead and ask the question, what advice would you have for someone wanting to provide cloud integration services to a franchise organisation?
I suppose that would depend very much on not so much the type of organisation, but the scale of organisation. So I've, since leaving the last role I had and since setting up Ocius, we've dealt with a few companies who are either just at the stage of looking at franchising, just have franchised, or even are of a smaller scale, but it's on their radar for kind of growth. One of the beauties of cloud software and web software in general is scalability. So both, I suppose, in two senses. One, that you can have the likes of Xero and some of the common add-ons, such as kind of Vend, inventory add-ons, Workflow Max for project management, that will grow with you. So in other words, if you have 2 employees today and you have 10 employees in 6 months' time, you don't need to suddenly change everything that you do. But also the nature of integration is that you can get information in and out of systems fairly easily. So we've given that advice to quite a lot of people that are looking at getting some kind of system. And our first advice really is to get one. Sounds a little bit silly and as a piece of advice, but a lot of people, especially at an early stage, stress over the ifs, the buts, the maybes,
yes.
and take longer and longer to get into something, thinking in the kind of older fashion of software, which is we choose something, that's it, and we're, nuts, bolts, everything screwed down and we can't move. Whereas in fact, we've even had some clients that we've set up a particular software with and then moved them on 3 months later, because the business just scaled that quickly. It's really not a difficult thing to do. So there's some core things to think about, and there's some franchise-specific things which will vary even country to country around data sovereignty, data protection, who owns information, if you're a master franchisor, how much control do you have over the information?
Yes.
But that's another one that's kind of best not for us to advise on. That's more kind of legal advice.
Yes.
But from a systems point of view, absolutely, the core advice is to have some kind of system. That's your selling point. Without that, you're only as good as the matter in your head.
So what I'm finding, and I haven't dealt with that many franchises yet, but I've dealt with business coaches, and they're calling me in, I'm doing the full setup, and I'm just replicating that over and over again. And then as the business coach, they're monitoring the system, and they have all this cloud access to monitor the system from the sidelines. And I just go in and duplicate what they want to whomever they want, which... So with the cloud solutions, the business coach can sit in the background and monitor the financial results and then prompt them along and coach them along, which is always
good.
Absolutely.
And you've got some, frankly, spectacular tools in the market, like the likes of Addons and things that, can pull information from a range of sources and provide, reporting and data that's just kind of not unheard of, but, 5 years ago you would have been dreaming about. So, your franchisees, as it were, just continue doing their job day to day, but the power of what you get as a master franchisor and the, I suppose, analytics, is spectacular in some cases, and how you can lay it out. And I think even for some people looking to bring on franchisees like that, I think that's something worth opening up to them.
It's a selling point.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a selling point that I can look at your data and tell you you're not hitting KPIs, or that your KPIs, you're so far out of them, there's something wrong. You need to be adjusting something. It's a selling point if you're managing, and at least that when you go into a franchise, you want them to be involved. I guess that was my concept of why you were going to a franchise. But so in your business, Ocius, How many staff do you have on board at the moment?
So we've got 2, plus we've got a marketing person on retainer as well. So we've got 2 employees. Myself, as I mentioned, when I started this over a year ago now, it slowly grew from so I didn't start it with another role on the side, but it grew from, I suppose, client-facing, taking up 5 to 10 hours of my week, to taking up 40, 50, 60 hours of my week. And we've taken on, a couple of weeks ago, we've taken on a graduate project manager.
Yes.
To effectively replicate what I do. So from clients that come in with no idea what's in the market or what they want to do, and breaking down what their business is and what they do currently, to getting everything set and ready to go, training, support, and so on. So yes, that's a graduate project manager. We will be looking, based on growth currently, we'll be looking to recruit again fairly quickly in the new year.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And then potentially again, if everything continues straight through, probably then again, so hopefully turn of financial year will probably be at least 4 people. Touch wood.
It's good and bad growing. So many learning curves that comes with growing. So you help a lot of businesses move to cloud solutions, and you've talked about the type of businesses that you look at to moving to cloud solutions. Do you perceive that there are any businesses, perhaps let's pick Australia, that shouldn't move to a cloud solution? So we're looking at a business that we would define as small that shouldn't be moving to a cloud solution.
Not particularly that you can define, to say industry X or size X or whatever. I think some of the core things to look at of the projects that we've run, using the 80-20 rule, if we were to look at the 20% that have been tougher for us to implement, generally those that we've struggled with would be those that just struggle with process naturally. So a business that runs on everything in one director's head, or everything in one person's head, that's always naturally a struggle, just because you can't teach a system something that's kind of naturally human, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So everything's based off, if you have a company that says we charge X dollars an hour for this kind of work and Y dollars an hour for this kind of work, and we have client type ABC, that's naturally very easy to systemize.
Yes.
If you have someone that says we charge X dollars, but if it's sunny, we charge more. And if we don't feel too polite, we charge less. And if it's raining, we do this. And on the second Wednesday of the month, we do that. That's impossible. There's no one person can ever understand it, let alone system.
Yes.
And that's some of where we get involved from a scoping point of view, to say to people, well, there needs to be some kind of rules. There's love them all over them. The McDonald's of this world have made, $1 billion empire out of restaurants run by 15 and 16-year-olds because of processes.
Aren't McDonald's in the business of real estate, not burgers? That's
yes,
my
I can't
theory.
remember. Yes. It's an interesting one, and it's certainly, I'm always cautious with clients about comparing to like the McDonald's of this world, because in a lot of cases, small business don't want their employees to be monkeys, and don't want their employees to be robots, but processes are good. Obviously, there should always be some kind of element that people can step outside them, but otherwise it doesn't really matter what you do in your business. Something's always going to stop at your door otherwise. And naturally that's kind of the biggest struggle. Certainly in Australia anyway. We've had some interesting things outside. We've had some queries from people on other things worldwide on things like data sovereignty, and people that are in specific industries where certain core partners or suppliers don't believe they're able to be cloud-based because of sovereignty of information and things. But again, that's more of a legal standpoint, and it's something we tend to get third-party advice on rather than involving ourselves in.
Absolutely. And as an implementer, you don't necessarily have control over sovereignty, because the solution could be stored in rack space in the US and then overnight moved to rack space in Sydney. So you don't actually have that sort of control unless you are putting it remotely on a server. But if you're plugging into a solution, you don't have that ability to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's think that I'm very, very dumb. And can you go through and explain to someone dumb like me how you come into the business and map out a workflow for my business?
Okay, so I suppose for those clients that we work with at what I would call the earliest point, so a client that speaks to us and says they are not even sure what's in the market in a lot of cases. Most of the clients that speak to us, or most of our prospects that speak to us, at least know what Xero is. That's usually what's driven their conversation, whether it's they've found out about it themselves or their accountants recommended it, or quite often like another small business they know or an associate has recommended it.
Absolutely. I find a lot of recommendations come from other small businesses, so
yeah,
good on them. Champions.
Probably a majority of our prospects, they've either heard of Xero from somebody at a competitor in a lot of cases, because although there's a lot of competition in industries, all competition talks.
Yes.
Or supplier, business coach, those kind of involvement. So usually they know something about what Xero is, if not what add-ons are. I still think a lot of people from client side, not so much accountants and bookkeepers, but need an explanation of some of the differences between like cloud accounting and Xero as opposed to the older kind of MYOB and QuickBooks of this world.
Like a desktop solution.
But as a general rule, yes, yeah, exactly. So, and mainly I suppose that's around Xero providing pure financial accounting, tax compliance, payroll, those things, and then using the nature of add-ons for like your business specific tasks.
Absolutely.
Quite often that's the first explanation for people. And then we generally in our projects, we go through 3 or 4 phases. So scoping first of all, so that can take any amount of time, again, depending what we went back to earlier about how many processes people actually have and how watertight they are. That can take the form of a couple of hours just discussing what someone does, how they do it, how they get information, where they store information. Let's take the simplest example of a wholesale company. Do they have a warehouse? Do they have 2 warehouses? Do they have production offshore? Who are their suppliers? In a lot of cases, do they have, obviously they have to have accounting currently for compliance, but do they have...
You assume that.
Yes, I was going to say, when a prospect says they're not sure or they don't know, that's another key for us to take one step backwards, because we're not accountants.
Yes.
Do they keep inventory in there, or do they run it through Excel for another system? All these kind of questions will drive us in different directions, and obviously that's the skill of what we're offering, is the ability to narrow things down on that point rather than having to try 4 different ways of doing something to try and find out the answer.
Yes.
So that's the kind of nature of what we do. I find myself historically, the way most IT projects are run are that inventory company, for example. People will then give them an inventory solution, run the entire thing through, set everything up, go in and train the clients, let them go live, and then turn around and go, these are the 15 reasons it doesn't work. What we try and do is basically reverse that, so that we do all of our testing, all of our training, all of our workflows with real information, but before a client goes live, so that almost the last thing we do is push the information and turn the switch.
Yes, absolutely.
It's one core part of it, and it's where I think for those people that get, I suppose, let down by software or underwhelmed by it, is where it's not been implemented correctly, and they've just gone in with a sort of Chinese whispers understanding of how something works, only to find out that's not the case.
Yeah. I think that, because I kind of come across messes, and you probably do too, and investing in someone who knows what they're doing and who has a proven track record in the beginning, I think is really essential. And I'm not sure whether you do, Dan, so let people know if you do. But sometimes if you're new and starting out in this area, call an expert who will actually work with you. So I know that I go in and do the work, but the client may actually think someone else is doing the work, because I'm kind of doing it as a ghost worker. Sounds a bit strange. I don't know whether you work, like if a bookkeeper or an accountant comes to you, do you work with them, Dan, or is that not something you like to do?
No, we do in both cases. So we've got the majority of clients, we work with the end client.
Yes.
And we've got a variety of accountants and bookkeepers, both in Melbourne and in other cities in Australia, that we work with. As a general rule, we actually recommend to them that the relationship is clear to the client, because I actually think it's a sell-in to the client to say,
yeah,
it's the same reason I'm not going to, if someone asked me for a chart of accounts set up or things like that. I'm not going to pretend I'm doing it because I'm vastly unqualified to do it.
Yeah.
That said, we do have larger accountants that get us involved just as they get, for example, a quarterly catch up with their client or similar, and we'll just sit in the corner as an employee of the accounting company and just sit and give our thoughts and offer a kind of professional insight. So we take both lengths, obviously, with the full projects we run them under our name, but absolutely there's plenty of
collaboration.
We work with. Yeah, absolutely. Plenty of accountants
collaboration. Maybe we can coin that term.
Copyright it.
Yeah, no, I do think that people should bring in team members to do the project implementations. I know I did one the other day with someone, and there was like 6 other businesses in there doing the collaboration on the integration, and that was fine. And it happens very quickly, and you're in there for a few hours and you're out, and it's done. So I also think one of the things that business owners need to be aware of, and maybe you agree or don't agree with this, is that when we come in and do an implementation, it may mean that some of their processes need to be refined and simplified and I don't want to use the word changed, but made better, which is even worse. But what would you agree with? Do you agree with that? I don't have my dictionary handy.
No, I understand your kind of hesitation there, but I would 100% agree. And with that phrasing especially, that's probably of a project that we run for a client, probably 80% of our time, take out training and things that we do at the end, but 80% of our time is probably actually involved in the analysis work and that side of things rather than the actual core of pushing information around and doing things.
Yeah, yes.
We've got, I don't have it in front of me easily and I'm not going to get distracted by the computer, but we've just moved office and we've got a vinyl going on the wall, which is a quote from someone who I cannot recall.
We'll put it in the show notes.
Tactical point I'm making here of the most dangerous phrase in the English language is we've always done it that way.
Yeah.
And we fall over that all the time. It's another one alongside what I mentioned before about not having a process.
Yes.
That's one of the things we've, certainly for our grad who started and for clients we work with and accountants we work with, if someone's not going to drive change and if someone's not going to push things, then there's absolutely no point in doing things, Yeah. You mentioned earlier people that don't have accounting almost. There's, a fair few people that you'll see as well, I'm sure, kind of move on to Xero, almost from spreadsheets.
Yes.
And their processes will have been born out of 15, 20 years of using Excel and the things it in fact won't do rather than the things it does well.
Yes.
And that's a fairly regular thing where someone, frog in hot water theory, someone kind of forgets the reasoning why they actually do something in the first place, so they just assume it's the way that it needs to be done.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned it earlier, but I think if advisors are going into this role and they can actually draw a quite simple flow chart to demonstrate to the client what they're actually doing, they can actually typically eliminate some of the processes. And the reason we're doing this is to save them a massive amount of time. And I know that I helped a client implement Deputy app, the staff scheduling solution, and it just saves so much time, and it was so simple to implement. And he went and did it by himself after that. He didn't even need me to help him. It was so simple. I was like, damn you. But so it does save them a massive amount of time. So when you might have already answered this, but let's just go through and maybe get some dot points on this. When you are looking to move a business to a cloud solution, what preliminary checks do you go through? So you said that the client needs to be open to change and to have some processes on board. Do you look at their internet connection?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, from our, if we're talking as opposed to what should a business think of, if we're talking of what do we, Ocius, think of when we work with a client or start with a client?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. There's the site that they work at in terms of the physical location. Absolutely, internet access is a key. That said, it's becoming, I would actually suggest, less and less important every day because the natural, Australia aside, the natural internet speed around the world is increasing, and the requirement on internet for web software is pretty much decreasing. So it's a lot of people will ask the question of us very early about internet speeds under a misconception that because Xero or the associated add-ons are web-based, that they need to have some kind of connection that would, make government agencies jealous to run it, when in fact there's only very basic information being transferred. So, in a lot of cases where we go, I would say the larger proportion of our clients, if we see them on site, either don't have Wi-Fi or don't know the details offhand, and we end up doing everything that we do just off of mobile.
Really?
That kind of speed is actually pretty much fine. There really is minimal concern now. Your main thing is actually not so much the speed, it's dropouts, and even they're becoming less common. But, I've had a few clients in situations that have said they have internet that can be a bit problematic at times. Usually for those, we just recommend whether you physically use a phone or whether you have, a little mobile hotspot or dongle or whatever, that if you've got one of those available as a spare, that's usually more than strong enough, especially now each capital city pretty much supports 4G, which, for example, in the case, as I mentioned before, we've just moved office. In an office we used to be at many moons ago, in fact, 4G mobile internet was faster than our landline internet. So,
really? Okay.
Yeah,
okay,
it's not too much of a consideration.
Okay, well, that's worth knowing. We here in Brisbane, we had this suburb built, part of it, which is a new suburb in Carina, and part of it was built with no underground cable connections, and no overground, no underground. So everyone is like dial-up. And so a number of my clients actually moved to this particular area. It's not the whole of the area, but moved to this particular area, and they just went crazy, and they actually had to sell the house and move out. So, but it's interesting that you say Wi-Fi is getting better, so shouldn't be a problem, hopefully, for people.
Generally not. And some of those core programs, like some of the add-ons that work, for example, Vend, that obviously works through retail, where there is a requirement, you must have your software. Obviously, we like to think for every industry you need to have something core to your business, but naturally with retail, if something stops working, you've got customers right in front of you. And in those cases, for example, Vend, it will also cache locally as well. So if your internet connection drops out in operation for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever it might be, everything just collects locally. And when your internet connection comes back up, it just sends everything back up again. Mm-hmm. So there's lots of kind of mitigation that you can do around it, in fact.
Yes. Now, when a business approaches you for work, do you provide them with a quote or an estimate up front? And if so, how do you go about calculating that?
Yeah, absolutely. So generally our work will run in one of two kind of distinct ways, which is either quoted or hourly. So it's usually defined by how far the client is, I suppose, through the kind of life cycle. So we have clients
the implementation. Is that what you mean?
Yes. Yeah. In fact, we have quite a few clients that come to us that have almost finished the implementation or have a product but never really implemented it. So, for example, a client that may, let's go back to the last example, they may use Xero and use Vend in their retail store,
yes,
but it's never really been set up properly, and they're now questioning how things have been done and so on and so forth. Yes. So those kind of ones, we basically have no option apart from to run, at least in the interim, on hourly, just because, as you all know, with similar things yourself, with kind of rescue missions, you just never quite know what you're going to come up against.
Yeah.
But in most cases, we can usually, obviously, in cloud-based software, we can usually get access in advance and at least advise what areas we can cover in what sort of timeframes.
Yes.
For our projects where we obviously scope, set up, implement, transport everything, absolutely it's all fixed fee. The nature of lots and lots of articles around it, I'm sure you've seen it in your industry or in your business as well, but the nature of financial planners, accountants and bookkeepers is moving away from hourly rates, more into kind of value-based pricing. And we're no different. So, a client, I don't believe, and certainly I've not seen the market will kind of sign off on hourly rates, because as we go along, we may find things we don't expect. A client can't be expected to bring up every single dot point with us in a small scoping session.
Yes.
So we've got set definitions of, the price and time involved, whether it is a vendor, Workflow Max, Xero, whatever it is. But some of the key things we look at from a scoping point of view are where information is held currently, how clean that information is. That's about the most common thing that causes us problems is if information is not clean. There's a fairly age-old rule of something in, something out. I won't be here, but everyone's aware of it. That kind of causes us problems with cleansing. So they're the kind of things we usually look for and make an estimate off of, as well as like what a client wants to bring into the system. So in almost every case for projects we do, the clients need training, understandably. They want some support and they want basic information set up. But then we look at, for example, if you're in job management, do you want to bring in jobs you have on the moment that are partway through? If you're bringing in, do you just want the core information, or do you want timesheet history, purchase history, all those kinds of things? And they'll naturally affect our pricing. So obviously we go off of that initial session. I'm going to be honest, we win some, we lose some, but we provide that to the client on a kind of all-in basis. So when we quote, when we have a scope there, if there's things that weren't spotted or things that are a little bit out of left field, or the client has something else they want to handle, we'll do everything to involve that in the scope. It's not the kind of construction side of things where everything's a variation. Aside from the fact that the client tells us they trade in, South America or something stupid.
Yeah.
Then of course we'll cover anything and everything that we can at that point.
It is very difficult on these bespoke solutions because everyone you go into is different. And I did an implementation yesterday and it was going swimmingly, and I was like hero, zero hero. And I then went to import the contacts, and there were thousands of contacts, and you can only import 1,000 at a time. And then all of the contacts' email addresses were incorrect. So it was like going, oh, so there was like thousands of email addresses that didn't have .com on the end of them. So you're going along, everything's fine, and it's like just fixing up that could be 2 hours worth of work in the data, you're going through and checking it all. So it's very frustrating when you're trying to quote people and you're trying to be fair to them, trying to
it's
work.
It's very difficult as well because, understandably from the client's point of view, you don't know what you don't know. So we have terms in our quote around, the core one. We want information that you currently have and put it in as is. We can't make things up that aren't there. We can't make things that, don't exist. Yeah. But obviously a client isn't to know, for example, that a field doesn't exist, or like in that case that, we've had clients, for example, that bring contacts information in, and in their old system, some staff have put, for example, you mentioned like Carina earlier as a suburb. So some people have put Carina in the suburb field. Some people have put it in the city field.
Or the state field. And you're like going, what are you thinking?
Which is right and which is wrong. But those, and they're the kind of things that, if we've said we'll bring contacts in, we'll do it and we'll work around those things and we'll clean those things, and do what we can with them. Again, this is kind of where I go back to talking about traditional projects and doing all the work and then testing it at the end and finding out it doesn't work.
Yes.
This is what we try and do at the beginning. So generally with clients, we will get a test system and bring in some sample information. So we'll just grab 5 of their clients, 5 of their suppliers, a few of their costs, push them all in, and then just give them access to say, is that what you expect?
Yeah.
Because I found historically you can play huge games of Chinese whispers. And in fact, I was talking to a client this morning about it because the simplest example, they asked for a particular report showing their overdue invoices with a particular filter. That's an example of something where we will literally produce the report, print the screen of it, and send the screenshot to the client to say, is that what you want? Because, one person can sit on the end of the phone describing something and the person on the other end paints a picture in their mind that doesn't even look close to it. And that's one of the most common causes of issues for people, I think, when they try and either implement themselves or they see a feature on a website expecting something or whatever it might be.
Yes. I do find that sometimes people, they think everything is going to happen magically for them, and they come to the end, they contact you on like the 25th of June and they say, what are all these things that are unreconciled? It's like, well, you needed to be working on that. So, but anyway. So you've mentioned a few add-on solutions as we've gone along. Can you, for our listeners, sum up what Simpro does?
Yes, certainly. So Simpro is one of the add-ons around Xero. So I think at last count, Xero's over 300 now. Add-ons in various spaces for all kinds of industries, and even some holistic things like payroll and HR and other things as well. So Simpro is a trade software. So its primary target is people in larger trades, so electrical, plumbing, and also some of the heavy service trades like fire, air conditioning, things like that, where you may have 200, 300 jobs even a day. So think of, for example, like the commercial site that someone's doing fire testing, but there are 400 fire alarms to test in that building.
Okay, yes.
So it's highly, highly customized software. It's almost what listeners may not know, but what you would class as ERP software. So rather than just having one area, so for example, it tracks jobs or it tracks people, it will do contact management, lead management, newsletter emailing, retentions, solar credits for Australia, all kinds of different areas. So yes, the franchise company I used to work at was electrical and plumbing, and they used it there. So it's the target certainly at the moment is not your one man band kind of guys running around kind of mowing lawns and washing windows and things. It's primarily kind of large business structure. So and it's just based out of Brisbane over here as well.
Yes, no, it is. It's based quite locally to me. I go, it's just down the road from me, actually. Can you share with our listeners what Vend does?
Yep, certainly. So Vend is another option, another Xero add-on, as we mentioned. So Vend sits in point of sale. So Vend is the web alternative to the age-old kind of rotten till system sitting in a retail store that you've had historically. So I suppose if you look at that old way of doing it, you'd have a till system in the simplest form that you would just type numbers into of that was $2, that was $5, that was $6, and at the end of the day you would just get a total and hope that you bank that amount of money. Vend is web-based, so it has all of your product information in it, has items and inventory, also has a little cool things that you can do it like loyalty programs. Plus it also has, for those people, we've just been chatting actually to someone here that has 5 or 6 stores around Melbourne, that then is going to do a similar thing to what we talked about before, which is doing some reporting across the entire entities, so they can see which stores are selling products, products are moving in which stores, inventory across all stores. So if if a customer walks into one of their stores and they don't stock a particular product, they can see what everybody else has. So those are things that kind of the larger retail I suppose stores have traditionally had all around the world, but they're now kind of accessible to smaller business as well. And in some cases, they're even used in like small coffee shops, even pop-up stores now. Pretty much all you need is an iPad and preferably a receipt printer of some kind, and then you've basically got a shop.
So how can an add-on solution promote themselves to Dan Fairburn?
Add-on solution-wise, I suppose for us, as I mentioned before, like our projects are quite engaged with the client. So when we do a quoted project, we're working with them for usually somewhere 4 to 6 weeks, and we're not quite full time, but we're doing a lot of work over that period. So we've got a huge amount of trust in there. So from our point of view for add-ons, it's really like proof is in the pudding. So the add-ons we work with, we're not partnered with the 300 add-ons that Xero has. Neither do we want to be. I'd pretty much need 300 staff. So we keep to the kind of core products in each industry, as well as some other things that work holistically, like HR and admin and things like that. So yeah, for us, it's more around, I'm not going to say products that work, but what you're able to do with them. So most of the products that we work with are quite customizable. So in other words, if you don't have a field of information that you need, or you don't have a way of capturing something that's in how you do your business, there's ways of making it work, and there's ways of reporting things. So for some of the key kind of add-ons, if you put information into it, you should be able to report it out in a way that's meaningful to you. So from our point of view, when we're chatting to add-on partners and some of the guys that work with Xero and similar, that's what we're looking for, to kind of go, well, this is not something that's going to fit one business that may come to us once a year. This is something that can, as I mentioned earlier, our skill is tailoring things to particular businesses. There's no point in us having a product that will fit one person once a year. We want something that's highly customizable.
Okay, good, excellent. So, your final question for the session, Dan? What advice do you have for a 17-year-old who's just leaving school and he wants to be the next Dan Fairburn and go into business and become a cloud integrator? What do you think he should do?
That's a seriously good question. I was waiting for you to go the next Steve Jobs or the next Bill Gates or something. You throw me off there.
To be... well, I think that, I'm not that they're not aiming high to be you, but it's always interesting to see what's the route that they should take to do that. What do you think was the route they should have taken? Did you do it quick enough? Were there things that you messed up when you do? What's the quickest route to get there?
In terms of what we do, I mean, it's a very tough one to say. I mean, naturally, what our industry, small industry, and very new, but what any industry recognizes is experience. Like that goes without saying. Obviously, there's huge demand in various industries for graduates at the moment and for people with degrees. See, in particular industries, that is appropriate for the right people, but by the same nature, 3 or 4 years of industry experience can give you so much more as well. From our point of view, in terms of recruitment of who we look for, if I talk about that, ours is more around who the person is and what they've done and their personality, because much more relationship based. From our point of view, I mentioned before, so I did my degree in the UK in business management. I actually started in an economics degree in the UK, which would be the equivalent of like a commerce degree in Australia.
I did a commerce degree and I know nothing about economics. I think we have our own economics degrees. Maybe it's like an economics degree. Yeah,
I need to be careful on my next point. But basically, I did 1 year and hated it, decided there was no real world use for it.
Economics.
Based in textbooks, and moved to business management. And then from there, I mean, I started when I was at uni just working in retail, just shop front. Did retail management, I've done business support, and now done this. So obviously, I mean, in terms of starting this up, it was just something that was passionate to me and I decided to go for it. But yeah, certainly I think industry experience is vital. I think obviously contacts are vital as well. Naturally, aside from that, in terms of being the next me, you probably sent me slightly short by saying it's not very high aim, but I'll agree with that.
Sensational. Thank you so much for talking with us today, Dan. You've been listening to Cloud Stories. I'm your host, Heather Smith. Please download this show, subscribe to it, and leave us a 5-star rating on iTunes. I'll put in the show notes how you can contact Dan Fairburn at Ocius Digital. Thank you very much, Dan.
Thanks very much. You're welcome.
Cheers.
This show is sponsored by Rental SaaS. Rental SaaS is your end-to-end rental management solution, enabling you to keep track of bookings, hired items, and manage your inventory. Rental SaaS integrates seamlessly with Xero. Contact Siva and his team at rentalsaas.com for further information. If you want to get in contact with Heather Smith, please visit her website at www.heathersmithsmallbusiness.com. If you wish to find out more about XU magazines, contact Heather at au@xumagazine.com. You've been listening to Cloud Stories. If you like this podcast, please download it, share it with friends, share it on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and social media. And one more thing, can you leave Cloud Stories a 5-star rating on iTunes? Thank you!